Hello and welcome back in, you guys. We got One Piece chapter 1145 with us today, and it feels good because not only do we have this chapter coming out today on a Friday, but the One Piece anime is resuming on frickin' Saturday, and we got a 2-episode special, an episode Sunday and an episode frickin' Monday. We're so back, baby. But yes, welcoming you guys. We're here to talk about the latest chapter of One Piece, break it down a little bit, cook up some pretty mid theories, and have some fun with it. So with that being said, getting right into it, we got the cover page story, which continues Yamato's journey. There's honestly not too much to say about it. I mean, Yamato beat Who's Who 3 weeks ago. We saw the fallout. We saved Minotomo. We saved the girls. And of course, as a result, we also ended up saving Page 1 and Ulti, which is what we see this week. There's nothing super surprising yet. But yes, Ulti is over here hugging her brother, and I bet they're going to be really grateful. We've talked about it time and time again, but Yamato, if she does want to mimic Odin's journey, then she will need scabbards of her own. And what better scabbards than Ulti and Page 1, right? Of course, they used to be villains, but we've seen many villains in the series of One Piece that change a leaf after something like this. And then, of course, when we go back to Odin's journey, a lot of his scabbards started off as villains. A key one being Ashura Doji. That guy literally ran an entire gang. And then Odin came in, beat him, and boom, he's now one of Odin's retainers. So yes, I wouldn't be surprised if Ulti and Page 1 ended up tagging along with Yamato, because outside of this, what are they gonna do? So now, on to the actual chapter. We got the first page, and it's pretty cool. But we see frickin' Goldberg, Sanji, and Zoro. Crazy lineup, by the way. A lineup that I didn't really expect, but they all team up together to take down a Groggysaurus, which is one of these giant dinosaurs that live here in the underworld of Elbaf. And I like it, right? So we start off with this dinosaur about to attack Goldberg and Nash, which is his living shield, which we'll get to here in a little bit. The shield ends up expanding, the dinosaur breaks its teeth trying to penetrate it, and that is when we have Sanji shooting Zoro up with a kick, and Zoro ends up beheading this wild beast. Love the combination attacks, and of course, we haven't seen a power shoot like this in a long time. Of course, my memory is pretty hazy, but the last key moment I remember them using this tag team attack was back when they were fighting Oars all the way back in Thriller Bark. So after this all goes down, Sanji asks a question that I think a lot of people have been asking for about 200, 300 chapters now, and that's simply, what the hell is going on with Goldberg's shield? Because we saw him in a cover page story, and the shield had a tongue, and everybody thought that was really weird at the time, right? Did it eat a devil fruit? Is it one of Big Mom's homies? And if so, how did Goldberg end up with it? Turns out that it is indeed a homie. But what's fascinating is that Goldberg wasn't the one who first got the shield. It actually seems to be a hand-me-down from his dad, because in the past, his dad fought Big Mom? What? Who is his dad? When did he fight Big Mom? So I've heard a couple of theories about this, saying that this could be Mother Carmel's shield, which I think could make sense, right? Mother Carmel did have the same devil fruit as Big Mom, and Mother Carmel did assist in subduing Big Mom here in Elbaf, but Goldberg unfortunately doesn't give us a timeline. Like, he didn't say it was during Big Mom's rampage here in Elbaf, because if he said that, then we would know that it was Mother Carmel who made this shield. But that is not what he gives us in this chapter. He simply says, yeah, let me read it verbatim to make sure I'm not like butchering this. Goldberg says, it came to life after my old man clashed with Big Mom. And that's it. No timeline. So for all we know, his dad was a part of a different pirate crew that just fought Big Mom sometime in the past, and the shield came to life? Like, I genuinely have so many questions coming off of this. Like, who's his old man? Will we ever see him? Will he be important? Or will this simply be something that Oda tackles in an SBS, and that's where we get the big reveal about Goldberg's father? But yeah, I want to pass the question over to you guys. How do you think this all went down? Did Mother Carmel make the shield to help stop Big Mom's rampage in Elbaf like 60 years ago? Or is his dad just that guy and fought Big Mom after she became an established pirate and after she killed Mother Carmel? Like, I really don't know. They left this really ambiguous, and I feel like this could be important later? Maybe? I just have no clue. The more I think about this Goldberg plotline, the more lost in the sauce I get. Like, I just don't know how I feel about it. Like, after I read this chapter a couple of times, this is kind of the main question I'm left with. Like, if I could have one thing answered, it would simply be, what's up with Goldberg's dad, you know? So after they talk about Goldberg's shield, Sanji mentions Zeus because their navigator, Nami, has a homie as well. And Goldberg kind of freaks out about it a little bit. He says, wait, Zeus? You know that guy? He's a high-ranking homie. So, yeah, I wonder if Nash and Zeus will have an interesting interaction later. Like, put two homies together who defected from Big Mom, and I wonder what kind of conversation they're gonna have. Maybe they bond. You know, I've been feeling kind of bad for Zeus because he felt really lonely back in Wano when Big Mom first abandoned him and the homies kind of turned on him. So maybe, hopefully Zeus becomes really great friends with Nash, Goldberg's shield, and they hang out together after everything is said and done here in Elbaf? I don't know. So we go onwards, and Loki tells the group that he was actually injured by the God Knights, right? Hardin kind of jokes about it, saying, oh, like, who the hell did you piss off, man? Did you do something while you're out at sea? And Loki says, no. If I got to the point in the world where I met the God Knights, I'd be king of the world by that point, right? Which kind of implies that if you want to be king of the world, you have to topple the world government to some extent, which, you know, goes back to Roxy Xebec's dream and also Blackbeard's dream of wanting to be king of the world. So I thought that was a pretty cool tie-in. But what's unfortunate about this conversation is that it doesn't really go deeper than that, right? Loki simply scratches the surface saying, yeah, the God Knights did this, but he doesn't explain why the God Knights came here. He didn't mention the fact that they offered him a spot within the God Knights. He didn't mention the fact that they want to subjugate Elbaf. He didn't say that they're still on the island even. He didn't say that, oh, you know, there's a guy here that looks just like Shanks. Like, Loki's leaving out a lot of key details, which I think would have kicked our asses into high gear, right? Because after we hear this information, Luffy's reaction is, oh, world government knights? And that's it, right? Like, man. Yeah, hopefully Loki says something and then the Straw Hats and everybody here goes upwards to the Sun Realm and deals with that problem. But of course, Oda has to stall the monster trio and Loki, or else they'd probably handle the situation too quickly. Or at least that's my assumption out of this, right? So, Zoro, Sanji, Goldberg, and Stanson regroup with Loki and Luffy, and they bring back the dinosaur and some firewood, because they're gonna cook up a nice hearty meal for everybody present. And that is when we enter the gag territory, where Luffy is bonding with Loki. Luffy's trying to feed him. Loki yells at Luffy because the food is too damn hot. He yells at him because he's lying down and he can't eat. Luffy runs over with some soup and spills it all over Loki. Man, Loki's having a bad time. You know, like, this isn't Loki's best day by any means. You get beat by the God Knights in the morning, you get attacked by Luffy with food in the afternoon, right? And brother, I really enjoyed this part of the chapter. It brought a smile to my face. It's old school One Piece humor. You got Loki and Luffy bonding. Loki gets more humanized by all the gags. It's some good stuff. So we talk a little bit about the deal that Loki made with Luffy. Zoro calls BS on it, saying, hey, it was probably just a trick, right? And Loki says, no. That was no lie. That was no trick. Red Hair's whereabouts, I actually know where he's going. He doesn't say that verbatim, but he does say that he's not lying about it, which now makes me wonder, how does he know where Shanks is going specifically? That must mean that Shanks came here and told him. We knew that Shanks came here because the subordinates talked about that way earlier on, but as far as Loki knowing Shanks' destination, that was always up in the air, because even back then, a lot of the fanbase thought that Loki was indeed lying. But now that he doubles down that he isn't lying, why would Shanks tell him this? Like, why would Shanks pass on information about where he's going? Like, imagine this. Luffy and Dressrosa just defeated Doflamingo. Guy's a villain, kind of like how Loki is a villain, right? Would Luffy tell Doflamingo where he's going next? Like, would he do that? Like, would Luffy go to anybody who's evil or bad and say, hey, this is my next island. This is where I'm going? Because that right there is essentially the conversation that Shanks had with Loki, which is odd, right? I want to see how that conversation went down, how does Shanks feel about Loki? We know how Loki feels about Shanks. Loki hates that guy, right? We got that information when we saw Shamrock, where Loki was like, oh, now I have a grudge against both of the brothers. But how does Shanks feel about him? Right? Maybe Shanks has a different outlook on this. Maybe Shanks is friends with Loki to an extent. So much so where he would tell him where he's going next. And expanding upon that thought, is Loki's information about Shanks' whereabouts still accurate? Because Shanks left Elbaf after he beat Kid back in chapter 1076-ish, and then he went to go fight Bartolomeo. He beat Barto, and then he set sail again. So does Loki know Shanks' final destination, or does he simply know that Shanks was on his way to beat Barto? Right? I gotta know how that conversation went down. I wonder how accurate this is. But as far as this all goes, we're not gonna get this information until Luffy fully frees him, because he still has his ankle cuffed, right? He's not fully unchained, but it looks like right when they let him go, he will spill the beans. And I trust Loki. Maybe that's naive of me to say, but I do trust the trickster Loki. So Loki talks about Luffy's desire, about wanting to see red hair and how strong that desire is. And he says, yeah, you know, I can't blame you. I actually understand that feeling. That's what happens when you look up to a pirate in your youth. Luffy responds by saying, wow, you know that feeling too? And Loki says, yeah, I do. If only I were more than just a kid at that time. And that's when we get it, brother. We get a connection between Loki and Rox D. Xebec. What? I mean, it's possible, right? It was always possible because the timelines would match up, because giants live for so damn long. Yeah, of course he could have seen Rox back in the day, but to actually get that is crazy. So Rox came over here to Elbaf at one point in time. We don't have an exact timeline here, but we do know that it is Elbaf, because we see Loki, he's like half the size of the door. So yeah, Rox came to Elbaf for some reason, and Loki said, hey, Rox, take me with you. Let me set sail with you, brother. Rox responds by saying, I didn't come all this way to take in a brat like you. Don't make me repeat myself. Which of course makes it seem as if this isn't Loki's first time asking Rox. And that is when Loki says, okay, I will challenge you for it then. Rox says, what? And he just looks over at him, and then next thing you know, Loki is lying in a pool of his own blood. And he's also stabbed. You know, like, Rox literally stabs the kid and leaves a sword in him. And he walks away from that bloodbath without even saying a single word to Loki. But he does say a word to Whitebeard. He says, shut it, Newgate. And that is when, if you look closely, you can see Whitebeard's silhouette. You see his shadow, and you see that crazy white beard mustache thing poking out. And boy, I can't believe Loki still looks up to him. Imagine Luffy. Imagine if Luffy said, hey, Shanks, I want to join your crew. And Shanks beats the snot out of Luffy. Shanks helps Higuma kick Luffy's teeth in, stabs him with a knife. Would Luffy still want to join Shanks' crew afterwards? I don't think so. I feel like Luffy wouldn't admire Shanks anymore if Shanks did this to him. But that is where Loki differs. He had all of this happen to him by Rox, and he still admires him. We come out of this flashback, and he says, I was born in the wrong era. He really wanted to set sail with Rox, and he still does. And that's crazy, brother. Ah, man. So there's a lot to dissect here in a way. First things first, Rox isn't a coward. Rox took Loki up on this challenge, which does dismiss a theory that's been talked about a couple of times. Of course, it didn't have a big following, but I do think I want to address it. But that was the theory that Rox was not a fighter. So this theory initially spawned in because of Buggy and Crossguild. Buggy is a seemingly weak character surrounded by really tough names like Mihawk and Crocodile. People thought that Rox was the Buggy of the past, a weakish character surrounded by really big names like Whitebeard, Gloriosa, Shiki, Big Mom, and etc. And because of this potential parallel, people really hopped onto this theory, despite us already knowing that, of course, Rox showed up in Kaido's top 5, and the fact that Rox had to be taken down by Garp and Roger. People did think that this had some plausibility to it. And that's simply because we haven't seen Rocks fight anybody outright. But that changed today. Of course, we didn't see the fight go down, right? Because it's a simple cutaway and then you see Loki bleeding on the floor. But that is still confirmation of a Rocks W, right? We see it here that, you know, Whitebeard confirms it that Rocks pulled out a sword on this kid. You know, Rocks is that brutal fighter. Of course, Loki, again, is a kid in this flashback, but we can't forget that he's still a giant kid at the end of the day, so he should be pretty damn strong. So yeah, I'm glad this does dismiss the Rocks is weak theories, and I'm glad we finally have a definitive answer, right? So another thing I really enjoyed about Rocks in this chapter is his demeanor towards Whitebeard, because he literally just tells Whitebeard to shut it. He says, "Shut it, Newgate, shut the hell up." And I was like, yo, that's kind of cool. I like that he kind of treats his teammates in a rougher manner compared to, like, obviously Shanks and Roger and Luffy. I think it really sets him apart, and I think Rocks being Loki's idol explains so much about Loki's character, right? Because Loki, hey, 2 chapters ago, he said, hey, you know, F the weaklings in the Sun Realm. If they die, they die. Same with his animals. Like, Gunko was literally strangling his wolf, and he says, oh, that's the fate of a warrior. And it's like, yeah, like, he probably got a lot of that, not just from Elbaf culture, but possibly from Rocks D. Xebec, because that's how Rocks treated his crew, right? That's how he treated Loki in the past. This is what Loki really admires. So yeah, Loki being this natural-born killer, this hard-ass, this trickster, this liar, I think a lot of that can actually be attributed to Rocks D. Xebec. I mean, hell, Shanks helped shape a lot of Luffy's character. Luffy is literally the new version of Shanks. So yeah, I think Loki and who he is today is all because of Rocks. And I bet when we get the Rocks flashback and we learn more about him, we'll see that he's kind of just like Loki. You know, I wouldn't be surprised. So we go over to the Western Village, where the Giants, alongside Dory, Brogy, and Scopper, are still fighting the Nightmares. And we do get confirmation that these Nightmares are plentiful. Last chapter, we saw Dory and Brogy use a Hakoku sovereignty to take out a Nightmare Loki, a Nightmare Nidhogg, and a Nightmare Ghost. But here we have it. They're still fighting Nightmare versions of Loki and the Ghosts. So this does confirm that they're not one-ofs. These Nightmares are pretty much going to be endless until somebody either takes down Killingham or wakes up the kids. Well, I don't know actually. I feel like they'll stop respawning when you wake up the kids, but the Nightmares here won't dissipate. Because 2 chapters ago, when the God Knights were eating food, Killingham pulled out the salt, Somers woke up, and the salt was still there. So I think by waking up the kids, the Nightmares will stop respawning, but you'll still have to deal with all the ones that are still present. But yeah, I thought that was a cool little tidbit, and I think this does make a lot of sense, right? Killingham whipped out that salt with ease, so it's not exactly that shocking that these Nightmares are just coming out of the woodworks. What's pretty fun about this, though, is that during this whole montage where they're fighting these monsters, they say, good thing these are just how the kids imagine them. They'd be tougher to beat if they were familiar with the real versions. Real versions? Real versions, huh? So I found that line really fascinating because that does still open the books for these monsters to make a reappearance later down the road, right? We see the Nightmare Fenrir, but who's to say there isn't a real Fenrir out there, right? Same with the Ghost, same with Nidhogg even, Jormungandr. I think that would be pretty awesome if we meet the real versions and we see how much stronger they are later. I'm glad Oda put it in there because it does bring that back into the cards, because another popular theory, and I like to bring up theories that I've heard of before, but another popular theory is that Garling, or maybe even one of the God Knights, is Fenrir. They have a Fenrir transformation or something of the sort, and when we saw Fenrir here, it really did end up hitting the brakes on all of that. But with this line here, it's like, oh, maybe Fenrir does exist somewhere out there. I mean, hell, if you look at this panel where Dory and Brogy are crashing through the monsters, you see a basilisk on the top right, and we know that exists because we saw the basilisk back in Impel Down. So yeah, maybe there is like a real life version of all the monsters we see here later down the road. So Scopper ends up saying, just as I thought, there's more. Wow. 3 of them. Voices this strange cannot be suppressed. I can hear them. And of course, he's talking about the God Knights. But now, what does he mean by voices? So there have been a couple of questionable moments back in Wano where some characters talk about Luffy's voice and how it's fading or how they can hear his voice. And what's odd about it is that we can't really come to a decisive answer of whether or not that's simply observation haki or the voice of all things. All right, because we had an interesting lineup of characters that said that. I think Law said it, Momonosuke said it, and we know that Momonosuke has the voice of all things, but for Law, that's never really been confirmed here or there, so that was up in the air. And now that Scopper's mentioning voices, it's like, wait, is he talking about the voice of all things, and can he hear that? Or is Scopper simply talking about observation? Because Scopper is the observation guy. So wouldn't be super shocking if it was simply that, but of course, the fun answer would be that it's the voice of all things. I would love if that roster got expanded more, because right now we just have Luffy, Momonosuke, Odin, and Roger. If we added Scopper there, I wouldn't really be complaining, right? That'd be pretty cool. Maybe we learn more about the voice of all things through Scopper if he does have it. But yeah, Oda did use the word voices here, so I think this debate's gonna be re-sparked because of this chapter. Unfortunately, one thing we don't get out of Scopper is what he's going to do now. He senses the voices, he knows that 3 weird presences are here in the Sun Realm, but is he going to act on it? Will he leave Dory, Brogy, and the Giants to handle the nightmares on their own and rush off to fight the God Knights? I think so. I feel like that's that's the fun answer, right? Scopper rushes off and he fights either Gunko or Killingham or Sommers. Because I'm gonna be honest, until the Monster Trio and Loki arrive here to help, I think we kind of need Scopper. And I would be amiss if there was anyone actually out there that wouldn't want Scopper to fight the God Knights, right? We want to see what he's capable of. I mean, we saw Rayleigh fighting Kizaru, that was hype, right? Rayleigh was over here flexing on Blackbeard, that was cool. Who doesn't want Scopper to do something that equally epic? So yeah, hopefully Scopper rushes off and fights one of the Holy Knights. And now, I gotta ask you guys, who do you want Scopper to run the fight against? Gunko, I think, would be an easy one to throw in there because obviously she's confronting his child. Like, I'm sure, just like how Sanji has the woman radar, I'd like to imagine Scopper has a family radar. Like, the minute somebody's about to kill his son, I'd like to think that he would step in and either take the blow or tackle the fight. See, I think Gunko for me would be number 1. Number 2 would be Sommers, because he did have the whole line about, oh, a parent will always go after their child. So maybe he ends up fighting Sommers. And then last but not least, I'd say Killingham. I mean, honestly, Scopper would fit really well against all 3 of them. They're all playing a different pivotal role when it comes to the chaos here, right? You can't exactly just beat one of them. Like, you beat Gunko, congrats, the kids are no longer walking towards the fire, and they're no longer walking towards the ship, but they're still asleep, the nightmares are still happening, and they still have thorns. You beat Sommers, boom, they don't have thorns, but they're still walking forward, and they're still asleep, and the nightmares are still here. You beat Killingham, oh, the kids are awake, and the nightmares stopped, but they're still walking, and they still can't be touched, right? Like, you have to beat all of them in the end, and yeah, I want to know what you guys think. Who would you want Scopper to square off against? Now, on to the last segment of the chapter, but we see that Saul has successfully beaten the Fenrir Nightmare, and I'm kind of impressed. I mean, we did see Saul beat Jormungandr a couple chapters back in a single blow, so I didn't think Saul was a bum, but I at least would have hoped that Chopper or Robin would have helped him to some extent, just because I wanted to see Chopper and Robin flex a little bit, but Saul, he got the W all by his lonesome. But the one W he can't obtain is when it comes to rescuing the kids. The kids are still walking towards the fire. Saul can't do anything, and he is now relying on the Elbaf firefighting squad to assist him. They're using cloud water to try to put out the fire, but to no avail. The fire is just too damn strong, and the water pressure is not strong enough. We see that the God Knights are having a hoot and holler about the whole situation. Gunko says yes. They will wake up from this heat, screaming for their parents in terror. Then the flames will burn them down to the bone. And of course, like, it's so that we can see how malevolent the God Knights are. But when it comes to Gunko, now that we know that she's a big Brook fan, when she says it'll burn them down to the bone, I just can't help but think of Brook. It's like, wait a minute. Does she want to see skeletons because Brook? Or is it simply just a line she's throwing in there because she's an evil celestial dragon? I'm not too sure anymore. But before the kids can be burnt to ash, Jimbe does come in with a crazy shoulder throw, this time utilizing clouds. Brother's a cloud bender. I love that, dude. This feat right here was so crazy that even the Elbaf firefighters were speechless. And it's kind of funny because going back a couple of chapters ago, we heard that lightning and fire were Elbaf's greatest weaknesses. This tree is so old that when a fire starts, you can't really stop it. The only option they had when, I forgot the name of the village, like Hogger Village, but when that village caught fire, they had to chop off that branch. They had no choice. But in this chapter, Jimbe put it out with a single move. Absolutely love it. I love it when Jimbe comes in and does something because Jimbe doesn't really get the spotlight all too often. So yeah, big Jimbe W. And we have Colin thanking Jimbe as well, saying, hey, guys, I appreciate it. The kids at school absolutely hate me, but they're still my friends at the end of the day. Love that dialogue from Colin. Very mature of him as well. And, you know, of course, I'm assuming, but I'd like to imagine the other kids at school feel the same way about Colin. Like, oh, Colin's a violent bastard of a kid, but he's still our classmate. So, nice, wholesome conversation. Nami's really happy, saying, yeah, don't worry, Colin. We're not done yet. We're still gonna save him. But that is when we hit the end of the chapter, where Gunko makes a freaking appearance on their Zval. And she says, oh, so not all the children were at school. This one sure seems lively. Dude, Gunko versus Jimbe, Usopp, Nami, Brook, and Colin? Who wins? That's a tough one, right? So we are faced with the 1v5. Of course, the strongest member of the crew here is Jimbe. So, do I think Jimbe can beat Gunko in a 1v1? That's tough, right? Because we don't really know the ceiling of the God Knights yet. Gunko still hasn't shown us everything she can do. Hell, every chapter we have the God Knights, they whip out another brand new ability. They have a big bag of tricks that Oda can continuously keep on adding on to. So when it comes to this confrontation against Gunko, I know it's a cop-out answer, but if I'm being honest, I really don't know how this is going to play out. Like, will Gunko straight out beat the Straw Hats here? Will she take Colin hostage and back away? Will Scopper show up? Will the other Straw Hats nearby show up? Because you gotta remember, Saul, Robin, and Chopper, they're not that far. Like, they literally saw Jimbe throw down the water. Like, he's close by. So if we need help, we could get it. But same could be said for Gunko. I mean, the God Knights are not that far, right? Sommers and Killingham could just show up at a moment's notice. And then another thing we have to keep in mind is that Brook is here. You know, her idol, her musician is right in front of her, and she has not said anything yet. So when she sees him, how will that go down? She didn't react to Brook in this chapter yet, but maybe she just didn't see Brook, right? She's only focused on Colin. So maybe she takes a look around, sees Brook, and then she yeets out of there? I'm not sure, brother. But, you know, if I were to just straight power scale, if I had to take a guess, Gunko versus the 5 here. You know, ignore Brook, ignore Scopper, ignore backup. 1v5, I think I'd want Gunko to win. I mean, of course, if you guys have been here for a while now, you know that I love Celestial Dragons. You know I love the God Knights, and I love villains as a whole. So, hell, why not? You know, make her strong. Make Gunko this insurmountable wall here in Elbaf, so that when we fight her later, at Marie Joie, or at a later date even, it will feel really rewarding to take her down. I think that's what I would enjoy the most, but of course, that is just my opinion, and I think that's also the end of this video. Yeah, there's not too much else to say, right? I'm just really torn on how I feel about it. And I gotta ask you guys again. What do you think about this? How do you think it's gonna go down? How do you think this is gonna play out? Let me know all your thoughts down below. And of course, as per usual, here in a couple of days, we will be going through those comments in the comment section and reading the top ones and just having a good old discussion about it. So if you have a theory, if you have a thought, if you have a joke even, or if you have something unrelated to the chapter, if you want to ask me anything, drop it down below and there is a pretty good chance we will actually read it. But yeah, thank you guys for your time. There is a break next week, but like I said earlier in the video, we got One Piece back, baby. The anime will air, so we're not going to be left high and dry. Hopefully you guys take care until the next chapter, and I'll catch y'all later. If you want to check out more of my content on the side, I do have a anime reaction channel where I will be reacting to the One Piece episodes over at Somnus Reacts, which I will be linking in the pinned comment. I also have a gaming channel called Syvduck, and I also stream on Twitch every other night at Syvduck as well. And yeah, you know, outside of that, we will be doing a couple of collabs during the break week so you guys aren't, again, left high and dry. But I'll catch y'all later. My voice is running out. It is late at night. So yeah, you guys take care. Signing out.